My name's Daniela, and I'm from the Oxford Professional Education Group. So what we work with is a whole host of qualifications. We offer things from project management, marketing, PR, um, HR, as well as procurement. The reason why I'm talking about all of the colleges is because obviously with AI, it's applicable to everything. There are a few awards or qualifications that we'd recommend if you're interested specifically in AI, but we'll talk about that more towards the end. For now, we'll have a presentation led by Robin. She's going to go into the Online Safety Act, what it means for you, your organization, and your brand. As we mentioned previously, it's quite current, and obviously things in AI are changing quite quickly. So it's good for us to kind of be on the ball with that. But yeah, welcome. We can make this as interactive as you like, so you can pop comments in the chat box, or you can pop questions in the Q&A, and I'm happy to read those out to Robin as she goes, or we can leave it towards the end. But yeah, welcome to take it away, Robin.
Okay, yes. So today is probably something that doesn't sound very interesting, but it's the massive changes that we will have experienced as organizations, consumers, and also users of these different spaces when the Online Safety Act has now come into full force. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go through what it means for you, your organization, and your brand. And you may be surprised what is actually in scope for those kind of individuals, organizations, entrepreneurs, businesses that actually fall under this. Sadly, I have worked with many a business over the last, like this half of this year, and they are actually not realizing that they need to take action due to the changes in this Safety Act. So that's why we wanted to bring it up today. And also the use of AI massively impacts whether you should be using AI when it comes to the Online Safety Act, and also how you're using AI within certain sectors. If you have any questions, please let me know, because obviously I'd like to get them answered during the session to make sure you have as much information as possible as we kind of move forward. So that is what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be breaking down these complexities of the Online Safety Act, and we're going to look at those clear, actionable kind of insights, what organizations need to do. And whether you're trying to understand how it impacts your personal online experience, or you're leading kind of digital engagement for your organization, I want you to leave informed, empowered, and prepared, really. Because the Online Safety Act is one of the most significant pieces of digital regulation within a generation. And with it, it has these bold claims, these bold promises. But with these bold claims and these bold promises comes big responsibility, big actions that we need to take. So it's really important that we kind of understand what we need to do in regards to this as organizations and individuals too, because it impacts us. We will see the impacts of this as consumers. So you may be thinking, why now? The Online Safety Act has actually been around for a while in various iterations of itself. And it's one of the most important pieces of digital regulation. And it is fundamentally reshaping how online platforms are expected to protect its users. And over the past decade, online harms, what are classed as online harm or issues, have become impossible to ignore. How often have you had to report a post that you've seen on Facebook? How often are you starting to see the little eye with the cross through on various kind of channels? How often have you been scrolling TikTok and seen something that you're like, whoa, that is definitely not supposed to be here in reality? And these kind of harms that are kind of on the internet are ranging from harmful content and disinformation all the way up to exploitation and abuse on these platforms. So in reality, this regulation, like I talk about AI regulation, this regulation should have been whacked in years ago, but tech moves too quickly, and the potential of tech moves too quickly. So what is happening is we're now going back, we're now having to reverse engineer and put in this regulation that in reality should have been there kind of when these capabilities of these tech platforms actually became apparent. And public trust in platforms, it has been shaken. And when that happens, pressure is applied to various other things like the government. And the governments have faced growing pressure to step in. Yeah. And surveys showed that parents, educators, civil society groups, individuals, businesses were constantly calling for these stronger kind of protections and accountability from tech companies. So this act came in with this big, bold promise. So the promise of this act is a safer internet where illegal and harmful content is addressed more swiftly, stronger protections for children and vulnerable users, ensuring online spaces are age appropriate, clear accountability, so tech companies will no longer be left to self police, but will be held to enforceable standards by regulators. So let's look at what the Act actually covers and who it applies to, because people are still misunderstanding who this applies to and actually where the responsibility lies within organizations to deal with this moving forward. So, the Online Safety Act is a new set of UK laws that aims to make the internet safer for everyone. Sounds glorious on paper, doesn't it? Yeah, we want it to be safer for everybody, especially children in this instance. So, who does it actually affect? It affects social media companies, video sharing platforms, and search services. They now have a legal duty to keep users safe. So, this comes with some core responsibilities, some core duties, and companies must put in place systems to reduce the risk their platforms are used for illegal activity. From a tech nerd knowledge, that is an incredibly difficult thing to do in some instances. Yeah. Because if you think about places that have forums or a student portal, for example, we're trying to balance kind of free speech with safety. So, how do you do that? How do you put into place these kind of things? So, that's what we're going to talk about. These kind of places must act quickly to remove illegal content when it appears. And there are also stronger protections for children. So platforms must prevent children from accessing harmful or age inappropriate material. Parents and children must have clear, accessible ways to report problems when they arise. And there's also protection for us as adults. So major platforms need to be transparent about the kind of harmful but legal content they allow. Users get more choice and control over the types of content that they see. And the regulator, is Ofcom in this instance. So Ofcom is responsible for overseeing and enforcing this act within the UK. It itself will punish codes of practice, showing companies how to meet their duties. And then it also has kind of strong enforcement powers to ensure compliance. And you may be going, Robin, I am not a huge platform. Well, no, Robin, I am not a organization that does cloud sharing. No, but we all have online engagement spaces. So what also falls under this are places like communities online, portals that are set up within our own domains. So for example, if you sell a course and people have a space to interact and add messages to, if you have a Facebook group, that needs to now be monitored and looked after in a different way. If you have a place where somebody can add information and then you are responsible for how that information is shown, you fall under the scope of this act. And that is what a lot of people are not understanding. Yeah, they think it is just for Facebook to clean up their feeds, it's just for YouTube to make sure that age appropriation is on its videos. But no, it is for anything that is classed as a community, a forum, or a place where information is exchanged, such as the bottom of your blog, if you have places that you can kind of leave comments. So there's a lot of things that people aren't really recognizing about this act. And the kind of proportionality, the burden of this, the duties are scaled based on the size and risk profile of your service, but everybody needs to follow the same core duties. The core duties don't change, even if you're a small organization to Facebook. The core duties remain. Yeah. And if you are kind of reported to have breached this act, Ofcom actually must consider users' rights, so like free expression and privacy, when kind of balancing that scale of kind of burden. Yeah. So it's quite interesting. And again, when we're really looking at who this applies to, it's not limited to our global tech giants. Yeah. It's a wide net, and it applies to any service that allows people to search, share contact, or interact with others online. So there's so much more to that than just social media platforms. Yeah. So we have our social media platforms. So we have Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. They are all impacted, yeah, because these services are built entirely around user-generated content and interaction. They're on the front line of harmful or illegal content and will face the kind of strictest obligations. They will be under the biggest scrutiny when this kind of comes into, when we're looking at this. We then have our video sharing and our streaming services. So we have YouTube, Twitch, and Vimeo, for example. And these are open platforms, again, where anyone can upload or live stream. And there are a higher risk for harmful or illegal content being put onto their systems. They will need strong systems for detection, moderation, and reporting, for example. We then have any online forum and community. Yeah, so this goes from Reddit to your Facebook group that you look after, to your open Slack channel that you've invited people to your Heartbeat community that you have created a subscription for those individuals to kind of be a part of. All of those fall under the act, yeah? So they're impacted because even smaller or niche communities are included. If users post or interact, forums must have reporting tools and processes to manage risks like harassment, hate speech, or illegal content. We then also have our messaging and our chat services. So WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, Snapchat, even things like Tinder or Bumble, and they're impacted because private or semi-private spaces can be used for illegal activity, of course. And while encryption creates challenges, providers must still assess and mitigate risks, especially around child safety. Something to note here is that if you use a WhatsApp group or WhatsApp notifications for your business, for example, you have a sales funnel and instead of emails, it sends kind of WhatsApp messages, you then need to ensure that you are looking after these spaces. So I'm just going to answer this question by Lisa. So where does LinkedIn fit with this model? So again, themselves will run under high scrutiny because they are classed as a social media platform. So they will have to work harder to ensure that the content does not fall under these kind of negative categories. If you have LinkedIn groups, however, that you have created for a specific purpose, you have to monitor that content in those spaces. The same also for a LinkedIn page. For example, if you have a business LinkedIn page, LinkedIn can also argue that you need to be mitigating that content because it is your space to connect with people. So anywhere that you can post or kind of send information, that also falls under this kind of barrier. And then we have anything where we do file and cloud storage with social features. So anywhere that you kind of have services that allow files or images or videos to be shared between users. So this is also interesting for those that run courses and have accessible kind of directories and content, downloadable things in a kind of portal space. That also falls under this. So you need to make sure that anywhere that anyone can respond to that or upload or download, you need to be making sure you have processes for that too. And then the last one is search engines and discovery engines. They will also be really kind of scrutinized in this. So like Google, Bing, and DuckDuckGo, all of those kind of ones. And search services will need to reduce the likelihood of directing users to harmful or illegal content. So hopefully this will really clean up the content that we see, but also it has a problem potentially with censorship. So where does the line get drawn and who decides that line? So that is something that is also an issue with this act. And if we look at the UK reach, so even if we are based abroad, like for example, I am in Sweden and there's other organizations that kind of span different kind of geographical locations compared in connection with the UK. So the act applies to companies outside the UK if they have a significant number of UK users. So for example, if I was sat here in Sweden, I created my course, but a lot of people joined it from the kind of UK, I would still be liable to this act. And if the UK is the target market, for example, or if their service is accessible in the UK and poses a material risk potentially. So global platforms can't sidestep these rules. Individuals can't sidestep these rules just because they're headquartered or placed elsewhere. Yeah. So that's something to note as well, something to kind of understand here. So who will feel this the most? Who will realistically kind of really understand and kind of have to deal with this right now, realistically? And the Online Safety Act does not affect everyone equally. Its impact will be felt most strongly wherever users generate, share, or interact with content. So these individuals will feel it the most. Yeah, so we have our big tech platforms. Of course, these will be interacted. And their scale and reach mean that they are the primary focus initially for regulators. There are billions of daily interactions, so there is obviously a higher chance of harmful or illegal content. And they'll be expected to kind of set the gold standard. Yeah, so advanced moderation, age checks, transparency reports, and user controls. We then have consumer apps. So this is any app that has user-generated content. So even things, so if you have your own app for your organization that has a kind of feed on it, you will be feeling this the most. Learning platforms with discussion spaces, gaming platforms with chat features, and of course, dating apps. And these apps may not be classed as social media, them kind of themselves, but they still allow users to interact and share content, which is the kind of issue. There needs to be a lot of regulation in areas where we have bullying, harassment, inappropriate content, or kind of potential for private chat. And what will need to be happen here is they will need to add stronger safety features, reporting tools, and parental controls, even if these weren't core to the original product design. Yeah. And then we have niche platforms and online communities. So anywhere that you are a part of a community or you have created a community. So smaller platforms can also foster harmful discussions or can be exploited, for example, for illegal activity. Regulators, Ofcom, will not ignore this. So obligations are proportionate to size and risk, but they still apply. And we must introduce basic safety systems, clear reporting tools, moderation policies, and transparent rules for users. Now, this is an interesting one. Absolutely any service with user-to-user features. Yeah. So whether you are kind of having community functions in your e-commerce, or you're creating a space where individuals can share content, create, deposit, and access content, there, even if social features are a side product, they still bring risk, right? So if users can upload, share, or interact, then harmful content can circulate. It's a no-brainer. So these companies often underestimate their exposure, but under the Act, they'll need proportionate systems to risk and handle those reports realistically. So the bottom line, the biggest bottom line is I want you to think, if your service allows people to create, share, or interact with content, you're in scope. The kind of bigger the user base and the greater, obviously the bigger the use of harm, the tougher it is to oblige. But even smaller or niche platforms cannot ignore this. Yeah, you'll need to take proportionate steps to keep yourself safe and your users safe. So every space that now allows people to do that kind of interaction with content has to do these key duties of care. So the first one is we need to tackle illegal content. So we must have systems in place to stop platforms being used for illegal activity. They need to act quickly to remove illegal content when it appears. And it's not just about taking it down, actually, it's about prevention, yeah, and stronger moderation processes. Of course, balanced with freedom of speech, for example. We then have child safety and age appropriate design. So the strongest protections in this act are for children. So platforms must prevent children from accessing harmful or age inappropriate content. And they also need to design the services with child safety in mind from the start. Parents and children must have clear and easy ways to report issues when they actually occur as well. We also then have user empowerment. So adults also get more protections under the Act. So platforms must provide clear tools so users can control what they see. We need to be able to block accounts, filtering harmful or unwanted content, easy ways to report misinformation. And this shifts more control into the hands of the user, not just the platform, which is why it is so uncomfortable for us to do this as organizations, right? It seems like a lot, but realistically, if we're not doing this, then there's going to be problems moving forward. And we also have kind of transparency and reporting obligations. Any of these spaces, so you have a community that you have created, you must be open about your policies and processes. We need to publish transparency reports showing how they tackle harmful content, explain what types of content are allowed versus restricted, demonstrate how we are meeting our duties as organizations. And this ensures accountability for users, parents, regulators, and the public, realistically. So these are the core duties. Yeah. But what does this mean for us as a consumer, an employee, and a brand? So from a consumer's point of view, we get safer browsing and stronger reporting features. We should see fewer harmful or illegal kind of things on the spaces that we interact with. And platforms must act faster to report them. We can report these kind of things much easier because platforms must provide clear, accessible tools for everyone to flag those issues. And we need to expect to be more consistent and see more consistent enforcement across platforms, not just these vague kind of promises that we have seen. We've got better protection for vulnerable users, so parents can expect age-appropriate experiences, children will be shielded from certain material, and vulnerable groups will benefit from stronger protections and moderation. If you are running an online community, what do you have in place for what are classed as vulnerable users? Do you have a way to understand or identify those? If you have a free to access Facebook group that is for example, losing weight, how are you ensuring that children under 18 aren't accessing that information? So there's a lot to think about, right? And we also will experience more transparency from platforms. So major services must openly explain what kinds of content are allowed. We get more choice over what we see. And also transparency reports will make it clearer. So for us as everyday users, taking a step back from our kind of corporate mind and our kind of business brain that we're probably sat here with, the Act promises a safer, clearer, more accountable internet. And that's great, right? As long as it happens and it is set in the right kind of way. So what about organizations? So let's look at 3 things that you definitely need to kind of think about straight away after this webinar. And the first is clearer compliance expectations. So organizations will now have legal duties to protect users from harm. This wasn't there at this level before. Employees, especially in trust and safety kind of compliance and legal teams, need to understand the Act and what is required. And non-compliance could lead to significant fines and reputational damage. So the stakes are high, just as when we brought in other things like GDPR, for example. There is going to be trying to read that sentence far too quickly. New processes for moderation and reporting. So if we have these spaces, content moderation must be strengthened, faster removing of illegal content, clearer escalation routes and risk assessments need to happen internally. Reporting systems must be user-friendly and transparent with clear pathways for logging and resolving kind of complaints. Trust and safety teams, they may need to scale up, retrain, or adopt new technologies to meet better regulatory standards. So even teams outside of trust and safety, like customer support, product, and comms, they will be affected by this. Yeah, so they will need training on safe practices and consistent messaging. So it does have this big ripple effect in the organization. And there will be differences in governance and accountability. The Act requires clear and clean ownership of safety responsibilities within organizations. Leadership must decide who is accountable for compliance. Governance structures like reporting lines, risk committees, all those kind of things will need to be kind of interacted with. Transparency obligations. So we must actually have reporting on this that can be internal and public facing. So what I want to say to you is it's no longer a policy statement. It's a compliance function and a governance issue and a shared responsibility. So Mel has just said, will this be overseen by the Information Commissioner or a different body? It could be led by them, but in reality, it is everybody who needs to understand this Act and make sure there is enforcement, because there are so many different spaces. If you have a travel company and you have the opportunity to review on your website, that is a space people can create and interact and generate content. So it's recognizing all of these different spaces that this can happen in, right? And then moving that kind of forward. When you have a brand that has a specific forward facing kind of voice, this becomes even more difficult. Yeah. So if your brand runs social media pages, online groups, or hosted communities, you're expected, of course, to actively manage them. The set it and forget it and let it run itself, it can't work anymore, because leaving harmful posts or comments unchecked could put you at risk. Teams need clear community guidelines, consistent moderation, and escalation processes when these kind of arise. So, for example, a retail brand with a Facebook group will now need moderators who are trained to identify harmful content and act quickly. We also need to manage online engagement safely. So everyday brand activities, social posts, campaigns, live streams, Q&As now carry higher expectations for safety. Comments, replies, and user interactions must be monitored for harassment, misinformation, or harmful material. Brands need to think about safety by design in digital engagement. Clear reporting link needs to be open. Moderation of live chat in events or broadcasts. Age appropriate approaches for campaigns aimed at younger children. Yeah, it's all of these extra things that we've probably taken for granted. We now need to moderate. And we have higher risks of non-compliance in these spaces. So if a platform or brand fails to meet obligations, it could face enforcement from Ofcom, and the fines are huge. They are not small. Reputational risk, just as serious. Brands could be publicly criticized for unsafe spaces, toxic communities, or lack of responsibility. And consumers expect brands to set the tone. A failure to act can erode trust, loyalty, and credibility. So if you ignore those harmful comments, it may not only you may not only get like reputational backlash, but you'll fall short of the compliance expectations. So having a public voice online now comes with a duty of care. Train teams on moderation and safety, put in clear kind of community guidelines and escalation routes, and to treat kind of community management as a compliance and trust issue, not just a marketing task. So if your brand is speaking online, you're also hosting a community, whether you kind of like it or not. And the Online Safety Act means you can't ignore what happens in your spaces. Yeah, so safe, well-managed engagement is now a legal expectation. It is not just good practice anymore. So I know this is only a short webinar today, but there's only so much we can talk about the Online Safety Act, with it being a kind of a regulation. But the key takeaways that I want you to take away today is that the Act requires clear ownership of safety responsibilities within an organization too. Leadership must decide who is accountable for this kind of compliance. And we need to have governance structures like reporting lines, risk committees, board oversight, and we need to have good transparency obligations so that organizations can understand how we're really kind of doing within this kind of space. It's not just a policy statement anymore. And if your service allows people to search, share, or interact, you're in scope. And that is what people are not realizing. The Act makes online safety a legal requirement, not just a best practice. Yeah. And the last thing I want to kind of say is, oh, my PowerPoint didn't want to move. I talk a lot about the use of AI. Yeah, we run these sessions based on AI technology and the wonderful things that it is bringing to us as organizations, individuals, and brands. But the Online Safety Act impacts our AI use. Yeah. AI generated content must still meet safety standards. If you're using AI to create posts, ads, blogs, or community replies, you're responsible for what it produces. Yeah. The Act does not care if the content came from a human or an algorithm. Yeah. And this means you need that editorial oversight still. AI can also unintentionally generate misleading or unsafe claims, age inappropriate or offensive wording, and content that could be seen as encouraging harmful behavior. So under this Act, we must put guardrails in place to prevent this from reaching users, especially children. And the Act pushes platforms and brands to be clearer about what they allow with the transparency, right? So if we're using AI, we need to be doubly aware that we need to tell people we are using AI. So if AI generated content also does come under this harmful banner, that we're trying to make sure our content does not, and content we look after does not, um, like the organization could face both scrutiny and public backlash. So the stakes are higher for consumer facing brands with younger audiences too. So using AI doesn't exempt you from responsibility. It increases the need for human oversight, clearer policies, and robust moderation. It's really clear. It's like this act is super clear. Yeah, brands must treat AI outputs with the same duty of care as human generated content. So I hope that kind of helps to demystify this act for you and how it impacts not only us as organizations, but it may actually make you realize that your organization is in scope to be kind of affected by this kind of space. And you can also join our Slack channel through this kind of QR code here, which is where I put information about AI and what is happening within that space. And there's also many other peers in that space you can kind of discuss what is going on with this technology too. So thank you for joining me today to talk about this really important changes to this regulation.
Hi,
Oh.
hello everyone. Sorry, I was on mute. I'm just going to be dropping a few links into the chat so that you guys are aware of what we offer here. We have the AI practitioner if you're interested in gaining a full-fledged qualification that touches on AI usage in different industries. We also offer AI short courses on the specific topics of banking and finance, business analysis, cybersecurity, education, healthcare. And we also have a marketing course, which is the AI marketing module that you can complete as well. So you can gain a CIM accredited qualification. So I will be dropping these in the chat now. You're more than welcome to ask any further questions for Robin and leave them with us and we can go through them there. Otherwise, I'll be dropping bits and you're more than welcome to book a one-to-one with a member of our team if you'd like to speak to us. It's been lovely having you, Lisa, as well.
And next week we go back to normal. So next week is a normal, it's not an additional AI exchange. It's just,
okay.
we go back to our normal every 2 weeks next
Perfect.
week.
What will be the topic?
Let me just check. I think it's all about myths and misconceptions. So actually kind of, yeah, so it's all about what AI actually does and what people think it does and kind of actually narrowing that gap from understanding to actually understanding this technology and what it can do for you.
Sounds exciting. Yeah, very relevant as well as always.
Yeah.
So yep, it'll be lovely to have you guys join us next week. Sorry, will it be from next week onwards or the week
Yes,
after?
it's next week. Yeah.
From next week, great. And otherwise have a lovely rest of your days, everyone.